Okay, so imagine this. It's 1989. The Berlin Wall,
Yeah.
it's still standing, and you're a young guy
Yeah.
stuck in East Germany.
Yep.
You desperately want freedom.
Yeah.
So you come up with this plan to escape, right? Risking everything for a chance at a better life.
Absolutely.
But then what if your plan was like compromised from the very beginning?
Oh, wow.
That's what happened to Henrik.
Yeah.
He was 20 years old when he tried to escape.
Mm.
And his story, it reveals so much about life behind the Iron Curtain. We're going to deep dive into his story today,
Okay.
looking at, his firsthand account of the escape,
Right.
his capture, and then the unexpected realities of being a political prisoner
Yeah.
in the late 1980s.
It's really interesting because what's so powerful about Henrik's story is that it's not just some kind of dry historical account,
Yeah.
We get to actually experience the emotional roller coaster that he went through
Mhm.
through his own words. It's like a window into a world that I think a lot of us only know from reading textbooks or,
Yeah, absolutely.
just like brief glimpses.
Yeah.
And we're really going deep into it.
Yeah, we're diving into this Cold War Conversations podcast episode
Right.
where Henrik just lays it all out.
Yeah.
And it all starts with this kind of naive plan that he hatches with two friends
Yeah.
to escape through Czechoslovakia. They imagine this simple camping trip that's just going to lead them right to the Austrian border.
Yeah, and their naivety really comes through like in their preparations for this. They underestimate the risks involved and they think they can just sort of slip through the cracks. They even time their escape route by sprinting across a soccer field after a game.
It's hard to believe they thought that was going to work.
Uh,
But I guess it speaks to their desperation.
yeah, for sure.
But then their plan, it kind of starts to unravel when they get to the campsite that they picked near the Austrian border,
No.
only to find that it's closed for the season.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then they run into the campground manager, and this is like a turning point.
Okay.
He seems helpful, like on the surface.
Right?
He even gives them a bungalow key, but he insists that they leave early the next morning. And looking back, Henrik believes that that was a sign that this guy had tipped off the authorities.
Oh, wow.
It's a chilling thought, right?
Yeah.
Thinking that you're being so clever, but the eyes of the state are always watching you?
Yeah.
That constant fear and paranoia must have been so heavy to bear.
Absolutely. And then that paranoia quickly turns into like this terrifying reality.
Yeah,
Early the next morning, Henrik and his friends set off with their map.
right.
And they're going towards what they believe is a less guarded section of the border. They spot the fence, this kind of silvery glimmer through the trees, but then they spot something else.
Oh, no, what is it?
A guard tower.
Ah, their hearts must have just sunk.
Oh, yeah.
What do?
They decide to move, further along the fence line trying to stay hidden. But then one of Henrik's friends gets impatient,
Oh,
pops his head up at the absolute worst time.
oh no.
And suddenly they're face to face with 6 border guards.
Oh, wow.
Shepherd dogs are snarling all around them. They try to run,
Yeah.
but the deafening sound of Kalashnikovs firing into the trees stops them dead in their tracks.
Can you imagine that moment? The adrenaline, the
Yeah.
sheer terror, like the weight of their failed escape just crashing down on them.
Yeah.
Henrik describes this weird sense of calm washing over him as he realizes that his carefully made plans are completely out of his hands now.
It's like that's the pivotal moment where everything changes for him, right? His journey is no longer about reaching the West. It's
Yeah.
about navigating this unknown world that he's trapped in now.
And that's where we're going to pick up in part 2 of our deep dive. We're going to explore Henrik's journey through the Czechoslovakian and East German prison systems.
Okay.
And we're going to uncover the surprising realities that awaited him behind bars.
Mhm.
So we left off with Henrik and his friends.
Mhm.
They're captured. Their dreams of freedom are totally shattered.
Right.
And now they have to face this new reality,
Yeah.
navigating this complex and often brutal world of the East German prison system.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating is how Henrik's journey through these different prisons,
Hmm.
it reveals this much more nuanced picture than you might expect.
Right.
It's not just this black and white good versus evil narrative we always see in these Cold War stories.
Exactly. His initial imprisonment in Czechoslovakia is kind of like what you'd imagine.
Yeah.
Harsh conditions,
Yeah.
isolation,
Yeah.
minimal contact with the outside world. He even talks about hearing crows cawing outside his cell all weekend long.
Oh, wow.
It just amplified this feeling of loneliness and despair.
It's just this total cutoff, right? He's left alone to just grapple with the weight of a failed escape.
Right.
The uncertainty of what's going to happen next.
Yeah, and then he gets transferred back to East Germany.
Right.
Flown on a plane full of other would-be escapees and Stasi guards.
Yeah.
And this is where things take a turn.
Okay.
He's taken to the Stasi prison in Dresden,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not at all what he expected.
Yeah, it's definitely a far cry from that Czechoslovakian prison. Henrik talks about relatively decent food, even chips.
Wow, chips.
Which were a rare treat in East Germany.
Yeah.
They had access to books, chessboards.
It sounds almost civilized.
Yeah.
Like some bizarre summer camp for political prisoners.
Right.
What was the Stasi strategy here?
That's the question that Henrik kind of grapples with throughout his imprisonment.
Yeah.
What was this like a deliberate tactic to lull these prisoners into this false sense of security, make them more compliant? Or was it a subtle sign that the regime's grip was starting to loosen?
Interesting.
As cracks began to appear in the Iron Curtain.
It's a fascinating psychological puzzle.
Yeah.
And then there's this whole interrogation process,
right,
which Henrik describes as this strange mix of intimidation and manipulation.
Yeah. He initially faces this very classic intimidating Stasi officer, yelling, berating him. But then a new interrogator is assigned, a much younger guy with a surprisingly friendly demeanor.
Okay.
And this new interrogator casually suggests that Henrik get a lawyer.
Okay.
But not just any lawyer.
Okay.
He specifically recommends the one whose name was scrawled all over the walls of that holding cell in Prague.
Oh, wow. I remember that.
Yeah.
So Lawyer Fogel.
Yeah, Lawyer Fogel becomes the symbol of hope
Right.
for those seeking release to the West.
Right.
And to have the Stasi seemingly recommend this guy raises all sorts of questions about their motives.
Were they playing some kind of mind game?
Right.
Trying to control the narrative, even through a lawyer who's known for helping people defect.
It's a classic example of their psychological warfare.
Yeah.
And that manipulation extends to Henrik's communication with his family.
Okay, how so?
He's allowed to write letters, but they're heavily censored.
Oh, wow.
When his parents finally visit him, they reveal that they hardly received any of his letters.
That's heartbreaking. The Stasis were deliberately isolating him.
Yeah.
Controlling every aspect of his life and using his family's worry to their advantage.
Absolutely. It's incredibly devious.
Yeah, it speaks to the regime's deep understanding of human psychology.
Yeah.
Their willingness to just exploit any vulnerability to maintain control.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this crucial moment when Henrik asks his interrogator if admitting that his escape attempt was a mistake would secure his release.
Right.
What happened? Did he give in?
The interrogator's response is so fascinating.
Okay, what did he say?
He basically says, it's your decision, but heavily implies that cooperation would come with all these strings attached.
Like what?
A less desirable job? Potential surveillance?
Wow.
Forced severing of ties with the West?
Wow, a true devil's bargain freedom at the cost of his integrity and connections.
Right.
What a horrible choice to have to make.
It really highlights the true price of freedom under an oppressive regime.
Yeah.
It's not just about escaping physical borders.
Right.
It's about the emotional and psychological toll of constantly having to compromise your values.
So what path does Henrik choose? Does he sacrifice his principles for a chance at early release?
Right.
Or does he face the unknown consequences of defiance?
That's where we'll pick up in part 3 of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll explore Henrik's decision, his experience in a work camp, and the unexpected twist of fate that leads to his freedom.
So Henrik, he's got this impossible choice, right?
Yeah.
Cooperate with the Stasi.
Yeah.
Maybe get an early release.
Right.
Or stay true to himself and face the music.
Exactly.
It's a decision that really shows his character.
It does. And Henrik, he refuses to compromise. True to form.
Yeah, good for him.
He rejects the Stasi's offer. He knows that you can't achieve true freedom through deceit.
That's a brave decision.
Yeah.
Especially considering what could happen to him.
Yeah.
So what happens next?
Well, as you might expect, he's found guilty at his trial.
Uh-huh.
And he's sentenced to 1 year and 10 months in prison.
Wow.
And this is where we see another layer of that psychological manipulation.
Okay.
And it involves that lawyer that the Stasi seem to recommend.
Oh, right. Lawyer Fogel.
Yeah. What happens is Fogel makes this really cryptic remark to Henrik's friends, suggesting that they'll be released to the West after serving 2/3 of their sentence.
Okay.
But for some reason, he doesn't tell Henrik this directly.
That's so weird. Why the secrecy?
Right. Henrik's left wondering if he's being punished somehow for not cooperating.
Yeah.
Was it because of his father's position? Was he being singled out?
Yeah.
The not knowing must have been just awful.
It's like they're playing another mind game with him, adding to the pressure he's already under.
Exactly. And to make things even worse, Henrik is transferred from that relatively comfortable Stasi prison to a notorious criminal prison in Dresden.
That must have been jarring, going from like intellectual discussions and chess games to sharing a cramped cell with hardened criminals.
Yeah, he talks about sharing a cell with a guy who had killed a taxi driver.
Oh, wow. That's a huge shift. He's gone from a place with some kind of order to a totally chaotic and potentially dangerous environment.
Right. He describes feeling like a fish out of water, constantly on edge, trying to navigate this new world and, just stay sane.
But even in that situation, I imagine there were moments of unexpected connection.
Yeah, he talks about organizing these classical music listening sessions.
Wow.
And studying French with another prisoner, these little acts of defiance.
Right.
Creating beauty and intellectual stimulation in the middle of all that bleakness. It speaks to the resilience of the human spirit.
It really does.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even in the worst places, we can find ways to connect with each other, find meaning. And speaking of finding meaning, the story takes another turn when Henrik is transferred again.
Okay.
This time to a work camp near Leipzig. But we have to remember what's going on in the world outside the prison at this point.
Oh, yeah. This is when the Hungarian government had opened a section of the Iron Curtain.
Right.
Allowing tons of East Germans to flee to the West.
Yeah, and this really impacts the mood at the work camp.
Yeah, especially for the political prisoners, because it meant that the buying out program, where the West German government was literally buying political prisoners' freedom, seemed to have stalled.
Their hopes of being released were dashed.
Yeah. And the criminals who knew they wouldn't be included in any kind of amnesty, they become increasingly resentful of the political prisoners.
So the tension in the work camp is already high. Right. And then Henrik talks about these hazing rituals that he had to go through, led by some of the other inmates.
There's this one story about a heavily tattooed inmate named Pierre, who basically claimed ownership of a specific shower hole.
What?
And forced Henrik to eat this ridiculous amount of food.
Oh, wow.
It was a really harsh introduction to the unwritten rules of that place.
It's amazing how, even within a prison, there are these power dynamics and social hierarchies that you have to figure out.
Yeah, for sure. But then, amidst all of this, October 23, 1989, brings a sliver of hope.
Okay, what happened?
A political prisoner amnesty is announced.
Finally. What they'd all been waiting for.
Right, a chance to finally be free. But then nothing happens.
So they're stuck in limbo, wondering if the amnesty was just another cruel trick.
Exactly. For a whole week, the tension builds. The criminals are getting more resentful, and the political prisoners, they're just caught between hope and despair.
Oh, man.
And then just 2 days before the fall of the Berlin Wall lingual, Henrik is called to the warden's office.
What happened?
He's told he'll be released the next day.
Wow.
He describes feeling this flood of relief, disbelief, and maybe even a touch of irony.
Irony? Why irony?
Because he's about to be released just as the wall comes down, potentially missing out on this more dramatic escape.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if he would have preferred to be part of that iconic moment.
Right.
Escaping with everyone else as the wall crumbles.
Yeah.
Or was this quiet release a return to his family and hometown?
Right.
More fitting end to his ordeal?
It's a really interesting question. And his story, it doesn't end there.
What happened?
He eventually makes his way to West Germany.
Okay.
But even in a unified Germany, the past kind of lingers.
Oh, so?
He has this chance encounter with his former Stasi interrogator in a Dresden cinema.
No way. What happened? Did they talk?
It was a brief encounter. No words were exchanged.
Wow.
But it says so much about how complicated the legacy of the Cold War is.
Yeah.
How the past shapes the present, even as the world changes around us.
And Henrik's parents, they also have these mixed emotions as they navigate life in a unified Germany.
Yeah.
His mother, she's disillusioned with the East German system and she retires from teaching.
Right.
But his father, he embraces the new opportunities and he actually becomes a leader in his field.
It shows you how differently people can react to such a monumental change.
Yeah. There's no right way to process something like that.
Exactly.
Henrik's story. It's so much more than just an escape or a glimpse into the Stasi. It's about resilience and adaptation.
Absolutely.
And the power of the human spirit to overcome adversity.
It really makes you think, what would we have done in his situation? Would we have risked it all for freedom?
Yeah.
And how would we have dealt with everything afterwards?
It's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
And if you're as fascinated by Henrik's story as we are,
Yeah.
definitely check out the full episode on Cold War Conversations.
It's a great episode.
You'll get even deeper insights into this time in history through his amazing experience.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the stories that shape our world.